Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about the architecture of the impossible. We're going to go back in history and we will be choosing some of the ancient architectural monuments to talk about their miraculous architecture, and we're glad to be joined by Dr. Bassam Al-Shamma, prominent historian and Egyptologist. Thank you, sir, for joining us, and good morning.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me.
Good morning, Mr. Al-Shamma, and first of all, we need to know, what does it mean, architecture of the impossible?
I was reading this book about the Great Pyramid the other day, and one of the phrases which was describing the Great Pyramid in particular was engineering the impossible. I love that phrase.
They wrote it like that?
They wrote it like that. Those people are experts in building the pyramids. They were trying to figure out the history, modern, the ways, the methods that the pyramid was built. And as usual, at the end, in any other book, you look at this building that you are looking at now, and you say, this is engineering the impossible. This is the architecture of the so enclosed to the degree of impossibility in achievement. One, because with all your laser beams and your femtoseconds and all of this, 2015, you cannot rebuild something like this. Two, you are putting almost 6 million tons weighing blocks of stones, weighing between 2.5 tons to 12.5 tons, and some of which are over 50 tons each, in one building, without one nail, without one wooden beam, without one adhesive force material, no glue, no nothing, no cement, no mortar, to the point that some years ago, some French people came up and said, oh, this is mortar. They were put in molds, and those are not huge blocks quarried from the quarries. Of course, we found the quarries, and we found there were 2 quarries in choosing those blocks. Local quarries in the pyramids area, and the plateau itself of the pyramids, so this is not far. And the other one is in Tura, on the other side of the river Nile, and the Muqattam mountains. Now, why would he do that? Unless he was a geologist. This ancient Egyptian man was not only a man who was a genius dealing with putting blocks together, or putting to the height of almost 147 or more meters high, or almost 6 million tons, weighing a huge construction or project, if you like, which is the Great Pyramid of the Pharaoh King خوفو. Well, of course, he was a geologist. And that is a new thing to describe the people who worked on the Great Pyramid. They were geologists. How come? Number one, are you putting almost 6 million tons, blocks of stone, a piece of land made out of limestone? This is not sand. This is rock. And there is not 1 millimeter, not centimeter, not millimeter under the ground level foundation.
It shows how genius were the pharaohs. How did they get this architectural talent to be able to build such
I say
great,
trial and error. And this is one of the very important things that we have to understand about ancient Egypt and other civilizations as well. You depend upon something called trial and error, because the Great Pyramid was not born out of the blues. There were attempts made before that, and there were steps, there were mastabas, there were bench-like construction tombs, there were 6 unequal bench-like tombs like the Saqqara stepper, and there is the unfinished pyramid, there is the bent pyramid. So you are taking it step by step until you reach trial and error. The Maydoun pyramid, a huge side, actually fell on the people while the building. That's why it was deserted. And that's why the unfinished.
But it took
pyramid.
Years and years, of course, of trial and error. How long did it take to build the biggest pyramid?
Well, here is another question, because always with Khufu's pyramid, and with the pyramids in particular, you are talking about hypotheses and theories. Some will tell you 20 years. Like, for example, Herodotus, when he said almost 20 years and 100,000 workers participated. Others came up some years ago and said this pyramid can be achieved by 8,000 workers. And it would take 10, 12 years, 8 years, 70, and so on and so forth. So with the pyramids, you cannot. The 123 pyramids of Egypt were attempts, and they were different attempts. To you, it seems similar, but they are not. There are different angles of inclinations, there are different heights, there are different weights, but the method itself changed from part to part until it reached the first, if you like, complete, if you like as well, pyramid. And the first complete pyramid is not Khufu. Many people think that Khufu is the first complete pyramid. That's not correct.
So
the first complete one is Dashur. and it's
Right.
called the Red Pyramid. And it's called the Red Pyramid because the limestone reacted with oxygen and carbon dioxide and hydrogen of the environment and turned into brownish color. So it gives that reddish impression, and that's why, hence, the Red Pyramid of King Snefro. Snefro and not Senefro for our Minister of Education. It's not so it's Snefro. There is nothing between the S and the N. It's Snefro, like that. And Snefro, not far away from Khufu, because he's his father. So probably some of the workers who worked in the days of Snefro worked in the days of Khufu, and some of the workers who worked in Khufu worked in Kaf, and so on and so forth. We also know for sure that engineering the impossible is something that you cannot achieve today. Take a look at the Louvre Museum. When the Louvre Museum wanted to get into the 20th century and wanted to get into the 21st century and so on, prepare itself for the 21st century, what did it do? What was the decision? Decision to make a glass pyramid. A glass pyramid. They did not choose anything from the French culture or from the European culture or from any other culture. They chose the Egyptian culture. So you became a trademark. The pyramid became an Egyptian trademark all over the world. And so on with Las Vegas, Luxor Hotel, and so on and so forth. Interestingly enough, we found out this, that some people came up and said, but there is no proof that the people who worked in this pyramid were those or these. And some people came up, and the Zionists came up and said, it was the children of Israel who built it in the slavery and so on. And we discussed that last week. But very importantly here to mention that the workers of the pyramids were found. And they were excavated. And their tombs of their bosses were excavated. We had gangs of workers. We had bosses. We had supervisors on gangs. Let's take a look at the other picture. So if we be a culture and a civilization which can achieve a pyramid and then stopped, I would tell you that's one off. All right? But if you continue with the achievements, and what I like about what happened after the pyramids is that there were failures. Of course they were humans. Of course there would be a failure project and a successful project.
If we build such a building like the pyramids, nowadays with all the education that we have in architectural engineering, for example, it won't be such a miracle like it was during 7,000 years ago, and they didn't have this type of education.
That's the
miracle.
I was giving this lecture with the students of engineering, of Academy of Engineering, and all the guys who were sitting right in front of me were becoming engineers and architects in a couple of years. And it was called the genius of the Great Pyramid. And the genius of this amazing architect, the man who was responsible for all constructions of Khufu, his name is Ayonو. Now this Egyptian Ayonó is not only a genius architect and an engineer, and he is not only responsible for all the buildings of the Great Pyramid of the king, but he is also something else. He is the guy who I think invented with his fellow Egyptians what we call nowadays one crisis management. Isn't this something that we teach people today in factories and in huge organizations, how to deal with crisis? Well, of course you are dealing with 100,000 workers. So there must be some incidents that takes place that you need to deal with. 2, organization. 3, human resources. We just call it names now. Human resources. Everybody is learning human resources. Everybody is working human resources now. But take a look. The prince of the king of human resources, the pioneer, is this man, Ayonó, who is not only leading a project of 100,000 workers, but he's leading that project for 20 consecutive years. Which is, if you're a boss and you have 3 employees, you will go crazy in 2 weeks and you'll probably jump off the Cairo Tower in no time, because they will drive you crazy. But what about 100,000? So we have to take a look at the other angle of the building of the pyramid. The architectural angle, of course, but also the other human aspect of building this construction. Let's take a look at the other one. Because in Aswan...
We need the next picture, please.
Yes, please. In Aswan, there was an amazing attempt that, okay, people visited in tourism and everything, but we have to really shed a light on it. The unfinished obelisk. The unfinished here. I brought you this picture because it's showing you an obelisk, a project, just like any other project in ancient Egypt. Look what I'm saying. Just like any other obelisk in ancient Egypt. But gaze at this picture and notice that this obelisk is not finished. It's cut from 3 sides, but it is not detached of its quarry. It still stuck to its quarries. It is not complete. The project stopped. So I love this. I love incomplete things in ancient Egypt. Why? This is not an achievement to do something incomplete. To me it is. Why? Because it will give you, and those who will say Martians came down and built the pyramids, it will give the human touch. And humans make mistakes. And human, sometimes they fail. And here is a failure project. You call this a failure project? To the standards of the ancient Egyptians, yes. But they had to. Let's take a look at the other one. The next photo, please. And you will notice that this project was stopped by the supervisors because cracks started to appear in the unfinished obelisk at that time.
I would like to get in here and stop, because you're talking about failures and how they had the crisis management. And nowadays, if we compare the way they were handling the crisis management to the way our officials are handling crisis management nowadays, especially in construction, if they found those cracks today, they would continue and go on with the building until the people would settle in, then it would collapse.
Well said.
And so on with other crises. So if you can elaborate on the difference and why those people had renaissance, what kind of system were they adapting to, so that we can, maybe you could try to follow footsteps.
See, the last sentence. I'll pick it up, I'll put it in golden letters, and we'll put it at the head of every lintel of every entrance of a government office.
Why is that happening now?
Why am I saying history for the last 30 years? What's the point of Bassam coming all over the place and telling you our grandpas, our grandmas? What's the use? The use is this. This is not, I'm not telling you that we were great all the time. I'm telling you we were great, copy. I'm not saying copy. And then when you copyright, you start from there where they finished and you start progressing. So now you are calling upon your grandmas and grandfathers to start, or if you like to restart, into this, what you said, that we have to take a good example of the ancient Egyptians. This is a project. Do you know the weight of the unfinished obelisk? The weight. We're talking the Ramses obelisks, 200 and something tons. Look at what I'm saying. 200 and something tons, one piece of granite. And if you look very carefully at the hypostyle hall of Karnak, the temples of Karnak, where this picture I brought you, and I still insist temples of Karnak, not temple, all right? You will notice that the historians called that, as they called the Great Pyramid engineering the impossible, they called this one room, this one chamber, in one of the parts of the temples of Karnak. We call it the hypostyle hall.
So there are several temples together in one complex?
Exactly, different times and different periods of times. That's why temples, right? Like a jigsaw puzzle. Back to the hypostyle hall, 100, boom. And that's why they called it the greatest chamber on earth. They called it, not us. The people who are studying our history. And the top, because you are looking at columns and you are deciphering hieroglyphs, and then you look at the capitals, and you will notice some capitals are different than the others. Some capitals are conveying the message that flower is still a blossom. This one is still a blossom. And others are open flowers. And this is very religious. So now stone is uttering religious rituals. Stone, the ancient Egyptians dealt with stone to utter religious concepts. So this is not an ambiguous civilization. The ancient Egyptian civilization is well documented, well written, well translated and transliterated, and well studied. And after all of these years, you still stand as a failure in front of engineering the impossible. You are still standing as a failure in front of the unfinished obelisk, saying he decided to abandon this project because cracks started to appear, and there was an attempt to lessen the height. so that they can overcome the problem of the cracks and go to another part, still cracks appear.
Why,
so they
why
had
is
to
not applied? This is not applied now.
This is what I'm saying. When we sit and when we talk and when we are directing our words towards authority, why am I asking to go around universities? Why am I asking this? Why did I ask this from the presidential palace when they invited me to Al-Ittihadiyya Palace? That's one of the ideas that I introduced to Al-Amn Qawmi, to the national security people. Yeah. I tell them, I go around universities and we, if you like, implant and sow the seeds of this to our students, because the generation now is, forget it. The generation and the authorities now, forget it. We should concentrate with the youngsters.
Did they have, in addition to the trial and error method, did they have any type of educational, engineering, architectural sort of thing?
Education in ancient Egypt started when you are 4 years of age. And there was a very interesting study which says that the students choose their teachers in ancient Egypt. So you like the teacher. It's like abroad. It's like when you like a section of a certain teacher that you like and you go and say, I want to study with him.
You have a choice.
Something like that. But the interesting thing is that the only papyrus which we found telling us about trigonometry and geometry, and the most pioneering one was 1550 BC, which is a good, at least, should see we're talking about 1,000 years at least, between 2,500 and 1,550 BC. So the first papyrus found today is called the Rhine papyrus. It's showing us triangles. It's showing us geometry. It is also showing us calculations and questions and answers, just like a test in mathematics. All of this is in the Rhine papyrus. So the first triangle that I study, triangle, not a pyramid, triangle that I study is 1,000 years after the pyramid. So how come the standard of mathematics, which were 1,000 years before it? So question marks? Yes, question marks. We study. We still stand in front of many topics in ancient Egypt, like mummification, like trying to raise an unfinished obelisk from the Aswan quarries, 1,168 tons. Once again, 1,168 tons weighing obelisk, over 50 meters high. What type of project is this? If the unfinished obelisk succeeded, you would have today a standing erected obelisk of 1,168 tons weighing one piece of granite. And if you don't want to discuss how it was cut and how it was detached, let us discuss how it was placed on a boat and transported from Aswan to Luxor, like any other obelisk. So it's not a project only of architecture, it's transportation, it's marine work, because you have to deal with the River Nile water, it's wooden boats and papyrus boats to transport, it's dealing with air currents, because when you are in the River Nile, there are strong air currents that can take the obelisk boat offshore, and the whole project disappears or get destroyed, or even, if you like, sink. So, River Nile, captains of marines,
we have
for example, this.
Picture.
Yes, thank you very much. That's my last picture for you. This is the Ramesseum, west bank of Luxor. There is another amazing project. A statue of Ramesu, or Ra-Mesu, or as we call him, Ramses, the second,
right?
1,000 tons weighing. One statue, one piece of granite. One piece of granite, the cutting, the transportation from Aswan to Luxor, once again on boats. What kind of boat would you, in the 1200s
take all that weight,
that can actually take the weight of 1,000 tons? With the writings and the carvings on the shoulder of the king, Hika Hiku. This is what's carved here. Hika Hiku, ruler of the rulers. That's Ramesses II, right? That's how he used to call himself.
Mr. Al-Shamma, how do you justify that far shift from that renaissance to a complete, I mean, that decline, not a complete decline, but that decline? I mean, there were rules, there were books, there was history, there is everything that it could be, take a look and a browse over to be able to draw lessons, to be able to, because the West does that.
Yes.
I mean, why aren't we doing that? I mean, what's happening?
Answer you.
If you're talking about engineering, we would have gone over the pinnacle. If we even could take a look over those very famous
Dr.
buildings.
Labib Habashi, God bless his soul, named his work of obelisks, skyscrapers of the past.
And there are skyscrapers, that's true.
It's the same idea of that pinnacle, of that apex of that top. But I will answer you with one sentence. What happened?
What happened?
What happened? That's the question that we always ask. Even us ask this. Even I ask myself this after 34 years. So I say one answer. 48 BC. The answer is there. Knock, knock, knock. Open the gate of 48 years BC, where the most depressing crisis took place in Egypt. And I think that is where the declines. You are very polite saying it's not a complete decline. I think it's a complete decline, but you are very polite. So what happened in 48 BC is the burning of the Library of Alexandria. Yeah. I think that's the line that you should draw between before and after. There is BC and there is AD. Well, now add this before the burning of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina and after. 700,000 manuscripts were totally burnt. Totally burnt. Not one trace of that. And you name it. Astronomy, medicine, Greek, Egyptian, you name it.
We lost all
you lost
the history and
not only Egypt.
The material.
Civilizations from all over the world. Why? Because there is a huge section, or there was, here is a very bad word, there was a huge section in the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a section, which is called Book of the Boat. There was something, there was actually a sign like this, there was a seal, there was sealed. Book of the Boat. What's the Book of the Boat? Any boat or ship that enters the harbor of Alexandria should deliver all its books to the library. What law is this? And we will make copies and we'll give you the genuine or the original, or we can buy the original from it or whatever.
Right. Mr. Bassam al-Shammaa, prominent historian and Egyptologist, many thanks for your insights, sir.
Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we now go to this report on Women Pioneers Day.